recently there was some stuff going on in the US. No, I'm not talking about the situation that we are all in since the start of this year or the end of the year, depending on where you're from. That zombie virus. Speaking of that, The Walking Dead latest season 10, its last episode has been announced to be delayed due to this situation. Anyway, if you are in the well and not sure about what had happened, now most of you should know what had happened, but if you are in a well and do not know what has happened, I'll catch you up on that. There has been some issues that surfaced in the mighty nation of US of A. It is a country where some of you viewers would be watching from. Now there are a lot of amazing things over there that we have learned from the different cultures that we could be in. So even in Singapore, there are certain things that we have learned from the US ministries, institutions, stock market controls, certain social policies or economic policies. And I'm not saying that the US or Singapore is a perfect country. Neither of our countries are, because every nation have their own set of issues, problems, strengths and weaknesses that they have to deal with. And those sets of issues and challenges are pretty often very unique to that particular nation. So a certain policy that works in a certain nation might not work for another nation to solve a similar problem. So sometimes with policy changes etc. in the government or how a country is being run, certain issues would be solved. Many times however, issues would be kicked down the line to the future people to solve. And yes, recently we are more aware of such issues, like pertaining to plastic use etc. In the recent few years, recent few decades, there has been more awareness about the rubbish, the waste that we are generating and the sustainability of our civilization on this small little planet. Some economists would say that issues like the housing bubble, stock market bubble, bubbles in general tend to happen and is expected to happen in any free market society or free market economy. So long as wealth and trading are involved, our greed will get in the way and get into play. And so many times our greed get out of whack and begin to form bubbles in these different areas, like in the stock market, in the housing bubble, or in any other asset bubble. Even Bitcoin, if it could be considered as an asset. Now sometimes our greed would even let us turn a blind eye into issues that we know have certain consequences, but we will turn a blind eye to it so that temporarily we will benefit from it, knowing full well that in the future there will be repercussions. So recently the issue that has been happening in the US is one relating to a major minority group in the US. Now I would agree that there are many changes needed over there and even in our current system in Singapore, but this does not mean that there had been no improvement made. Now in the last few decades, the last 30, 50, 80 years, there has been many changes made, many bills rectified and amendments made to the different government's constitution to bring equality closer to our homes. But I'm sure we can all agree that it is not full equality yet, especially in certain countries, that's for sure. But I'm sure we can all agree that there have been many improvements made for better in the name of equality. Now do keep in mind that my perspective are based on the things that I have read and the things that I know, so it is biased. No reports are unbiased. There's no such thing as unbiased report. I believe even the most factual or statistical reports would be biased a certain way based on the creator or the author's own worldview. So no, I'm sure I do not know the whole picture, which is why what I'm sharing here is just my 2 cents. It is not to sway you in any direction, but to bring to you another perspective, and hopefully by understanding more different perspectives you would be able to come with your own conclusion or your own perspective. Now in this video today I would like to talk about privilege. It is usually a very shunned word, negative connotation. If you call someone privileged, it would usually bring this assumption that this person had a protected environment growing up, was given more opportunities than others, a long list of other positive treatments that they had received because they are of the privileged class. Now from what I know, most nations on earth have a dominant group, be it racial or religious, and then there are others, sometimes a single one, but sometimes many others, minority groups within the nation or any population. And then sometimes, unfortunately, conflicts would arise when one side, usually the minority side, felt their voices are not heard. Now some easy conflicts that we could see in our current world are like the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka or the Kurdish, Tibetan, Scottish, Catalonian independence movement, and even from history, the Irish, the American independence. or conflicts in the Balkan regions. Now from those cases, we can see that when sufficient enough voices are unheard or seem to be unattended to, tensions and conflict would arise when those oppressed groups try to fight for their rights. If their rights have not seemed to have improved from their perspective, once again, Singapore is not a perfect country, but one of the policies that seem to have worked is racial and religious integration, where if you see all those HDB blocks, there were certain racial quotas set such that everybody, like 99% of us, would have someone we know pretty close, a friend, colleague, a classmate, a schoolmate, a best buddy, heck, even a partner in crime who is of a different race or religion. Having a friend like that would require some sort of cultural and social understanding, which would create empathy when there's none. Now, if we go back to the word privilege, since you are watching YouTube video on this channel, which usually we talk about personal finance, so if you are watching this, you would be pretty well aware of this term called self-made. So there are many people who are self-made millionaires, self-made billionaires, a self-made entrepreneur, maybe even a self-made guru. But the question is, who truly is a self-made? Each of us would have our own definition, our own requirements, our own qualifications of who qualifies to be self-made. For example, Donald Trump, is he a self-made billionaire? Now, there will be two sides to the argument. Some would argue that yes, he is a self-made billionaire because due to his hard work, he managed to turn his company, his parents' company, into a multi-billion-dollar empire. So from this camp, they would argue that he is self-made, whereas there will also be, over on the other camp, arguments made that he is not self-made because he started out with an existing multi-million-dollar empire, not a billion-dollar empire, but a multi-million-dollar empire nevertheless, which already put him on the top 1 to 5% list. Now, if we compare this to, say, Mark Zuckerberg, if we compare Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, more people would be on the camp who would agree that he is a self-made than saying he has any privilege. Yes, he has certain form of privilege. For example, being born in the US, being born in the right generation where internet and computers have been pretty easily accessible and attainable in most households. Now, if we use a dictionary's definition of a self-made, both can be rightly said to be self-made. If so, let's imagine there is a whole spectrum of self-made. So there are some of them who are more self-made compared to the rest. So maybe Mark Zuckerberg is a more self-made guy compared to Donald, who is self-made but on a lower end of the self-made spectrum. And if you start to take the whole list of thousands of billionaires and list them all out according to their self-madeness, if they are self-made, you would probably be categorizing them by the amount of money or resources that they started with. And if they started with negligible or insignificant resources and currently becoming billionaires, you would likely put them in the highest tier of the self-made spectrum. Whereas those like the Rothschild families or people who inherited most of their wealth but they still managed to grow their wealth over time, you would likely put them on the lower tier of this whole self-made spectrum. So why did I bring up this self-made spectrum? Is because people who we deem to be more self-made are those who are less privileged, and people who we deem as more self-made are people who we deem to have a certain privilege already when they started. So one example of a privilege could be an internet connection or simply owning a mobile device. Like even being able to watch a YouTube video like this right here right now is a privilege, if you would agree with me. Now, many of us like to use the term the African kid, which has a very negative connotation because we would say things like don't waste food, the African kid has no food, or don't waste water, the African kid has no clean water. But many times we ourselves take for granted the privileges that we have as individuals of any certain country or wherever we live in. Now, wherever you're watching from, if you believe that in your country there is no such thing as oppression or underprivileged groups, then very probably, very likely you are part of the privileged group and have not managed to see anyone who is from underprivileged. So what's next after knowing that you are in this privileged group who have certain advantages that many others do not have? You live in this era where hopefully you have accessible and stable electricity and clean water, comfortable clothes, basic medical care. What's next after knowing that all these privileges are given to you the day you were born? Now, first off, you can be contented and stop complaining about things when it doesn't go your way, after which you can start using this privilege to fight for the rights or try to help and support people who are fighting for the same privilege or the same right that you have been enjoying and taking for granted. Remember that there will always be someone worse off than you. Now, is there something simpler that each and every one of us can do to support the underprivileged, to help them gain certain privileges that we have right now in wherever we are watching this video? I'm so glad you asked, because recently, I think it was starting of this year or the end of last year, I stumbled upon this app, ShareTheMeal App. You might have seen its advertisement. Now, if you have not downloaded it, I would advise or recommend that you download it and start trying it out, see what it does. Now, with the app, it's very seamless. You can start donating to a certain cause to feed people who do not have the privilege of 3 meals a day or any mealtime that they choose. Now, in our privileged and developed worlds, most of us can choose to have any number of meals we want. If we are not affected by gaining weight, of course, we can have like breakfast, brunch, lunch, tea time, high tea, dinner, supper, late night supper. We can have so many meals that we want, whereas there are certain people or certain groups of people in the world who are underprivileged and aren't able to even enjoy a single meal a day. So this ShareTheMeal app is a way which you can, for a very low cost, be able to start helping or supporting people who are fighting for the rights, the privileges that many of us enjoy, but these underprivileged do not. Now, I truly believe that everyone has talents. Some of us have more talents, some of us have less talents, but every single one of us would have certain unique talents. Now, if you feel that you have no such talent to show off, then I would say that it does not mean that you have no talent. It only means that you have not uncovered or discovered the talent that you were given. And the next question you might ask is, how can you begin to discover this talent? It's very simple. Start to do different things, start to learn different things, basically exposure. Once you get more and more exposure, the probability of you finding your own talent would increase. Alright, long video, I've shared what I wanted to share. Hope you stay safe and learn something today. Now, if you find this video helpful to you, you can always share it with your friends who you think or feel that it might help. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay wealthy. See you guys next time.